I'm the IT director for MedPlast, and we are a contract manufacturer of plastic molded parts. So we do some elastomers as well, mainly the healthcare market. Some industrial products as well. If you've ever actually signed for a package from UPS and you signed that little tablet, we made the face of that. So, we were founded in 2008, an acquisition of 2 separate companies with 5 locations. This presentation is a little outdated. As of Monday, we just closed on another, I think, 8 locations, some in Europe and Asia and Mexico. So I'm going to be real busy coming up here soon. Employees, so it was 650, now we're about 2,000 plus, and annual sales are going to be about $250 million after this acquisition. Some of the things we make are these devices used in surgery. Being medical products, obviously the data retention and data archiving is important to our customers because if there's ever a lawsuit or a recall, you need to go back and find the data. It's important to be able to retain all that. As far as our IT environment, it's an extremely lean IT group. In fact, until Monday, we were basically looking at the IT group. We leverage a lot of cloud services. We run a 24/7 environment at 5 locations, and like I said, now quite a bit more. We try to do as much as possible through the cloud, so we're somewhat on the leading edge when it comes to cloud technology. We have, for example, Exchange email hosted in the cloud, our document management system hosted in the cloud, CRM system, we use Salesforce. The data center is outsourced to a colo provider, obviously, spam filtering, all that kind of thing. It lets us keep pretty lean and focus on, what our business does best, which is making medical products, not IT. The whole movement toward the cloud, I think ultimately it's going to start changing IT departments and the function of corporate IT going forward. More from there's going to be more vendor management involved and less hardcore technical details. I think we're starting to see a little bit of this transition, but I think that's something that is in the process of happening. It's going to change how the IT department interacts with the business, I think. We have services centralized as much as possible. We've got file print services, remote sites, everything that can be centralized in the data center is centralized. We've got an environment with about 40 virtual machines, and we're probably going to have about 60 here coming up real soon, so it's growing pretty quick. We take snapshots of the virtual machines daily, and we're using a disk-to-disk backup, basically with tape as the archival and long-term storage off-site type of medium. When we were looking at a cloud storage solution, obviously one of the things that we wanted to focus on is make sure that it's compatible with VMware and plays well with VMware and so forth. We were backing up our data onto a data domain device using Commvault and Veeam, basically kind of a combination of those two. Obviously the data domain device does deduping compression, but it's just local disk, and the disk was getting full. Backups were starting to spill outside of the backup window. Offsite copies were kind of a hodgepodge mix of disk copies, manual monthly tape rotations for the bigger data that we couldn't really replicate with limited bandwidth. There's a lot of different moving parts here. You got your primary volume, your backup software, your Veeam or your Commvault, whatnot. You dump that onto disk, then you replicate that, and then you dump it to tape for archival, tape that tape off-site. You have hardware maintenance costs with disk drives, tape drives, a lot of vendors to manage throughout this whole process, off-site storage to coordinate, backup software to maintain. It's a manual process, error-prone, takes quite a bit of time to manage that. What are we going to do? So basically, the traditional solution is to buy more disks. Obviously that's kind of a band-aid solution. It doesn't really address the issue, it just addresses the immediate problem. With that, you're going to need plenty of capital. You got power, cooling, maintenance, all that type of stuff on additional disks, and you're still not even fixing the problem. Wash, rinse, repeat, do the whole thing again. Oh, you want DR, offsite replication? Well, just buy 2. I'm sure the vendors love that. You buy 2 of everything. And on top of all this, you still might need tape for long-term or archival storage, depending on what your data retention requirements are. I know for us, a lot of our customers want us to keep data at least 7 years, maybe longer, sometimes life of the product. So there's all sorts of varying requirements there that can change what you're looking for. Some of the things that we were looking to capture here with the cloud storage project, instead of just buying a bigger disk, was lowering the capex. Obviously, one advantage of cloud storage is you only pay for what you use when you use it. So that's very appealing, not only to IT, but to the CFO and everybody else as well. Fewer power, cooling, and space headaches, that's kind of obvious. One of the advantages of cloud storage is obviously your data is protected from a natural disaster. And that depends too. You need to evaluate the cloud vendor you're taking a look at to see what kind of geo-replication features they have. When you talk about cloud storage, there will be some issues we had to address. By default, out of the box, most cloud storage is HTTP. Integrating with your existing solution, how do you do that? When latency problems, pulling data from the cloud is not going to be nearly as fast as pulling from your disk. You can't use traditional WAN optimization methods with cloud links. And then there's security, and this comes down to, a lot of the security stuff, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, it's a lot more perception than it is reality. If you take the right steps, I don't think there's really much to worry about here, but whenever you talk about sending data onto the quote public cloud, you'll find that management, they kind of freak out about that stuff. And then obviously, everybody says, well, how much is going to cost per month? I got this monthly bill now, what's that going to be? So when you talk about choosing a storage appliance, you got to think, okay, what do you need? You want a NAS? You want something that's iSCSI? You want something that's fiber channel? Because there's a lot of cloud storage products out there, but and they all, on the face of them, might seem similar, but when you dive in and start looking at some of these details, they're definitely different, and they each have their unique capabilities. We had an existing fiber channel environment, but I don't think we were really taking advantage of it. And, with the advances in iSCSI, for most of our workloads, iSCSI was going to be fine. I mean, the primary thing we were going to put on this device would be VMware VMDKs that we wanted to run live, and also some file server data. And for most of our needs, iSCSI did what we needed to do, and it's a lot simpler to administer than fiber channel, obviously, with a small IT environment. We wanted to make sure that, obviously, like I said, the device was certified for VMware hosting live production VMs. We wanted to make sure it was Microsoft certified so that we didn't have any compatibility issues, finger pointing if we had problems and whatnot. We wanted to make sure that it used the cloud as a storage tier rather than just the backup. I mean, some of these appliances you'll find they just back up to the cloud, but they don't use it as a tier. We wanted to have, make sure that the tiering obviously is, the smart tiering, kind of like you write a block, and depending on the level of access, is it being read a lot, or is it just kind of written once and not touched? It tiers back from SSD to spinning disk, and then finally to the cloud. So these are some of the things we were looking at. We also wanted to make sure the device was cloud agnostic. Some vendors out there, depending on who you look at, they will want to sell you the device and the service to go with it. Sometimes you find that they're actually reselling, Amazon or Microsoft or some other cloud on the back end, but really we wanted that to be two separate relationships. That way, we're managing the whole thing, and as cloud prices go down, we're able to take advantage of that. We didn't really want another middleman between us and the cloud storage provider, so we wanted to keep that as two separate vendor relationships. Also, obviously, for security and to reassure management, auditors, all that type of thing, we wanted to keep our own encryption keys. Make sure that the cloud vendor, either the cloud storage vendor or the appliance vendor doesn't have access to our data. We wanted something that supported compression and deduplication prior to uploading to the cloud. Obviously, with cloud storage, you're paying by the gig, so of course, if you can dedupe and you can compress, your bill will be less. I didn't really mean that to rhyme, but so anyway, obviously when you're paying by the gig, you want to do these things. It's just smart policy. We wanted to make sure it was an enterprise-grade hardware solution. A lot of the products you see out there, either they're a virtual machine or maybe it's a standard server with a name badge slapped onto it or something like that. We wanted to make sure it had redundant everything, because obviously we're running pretty critical stuff on here. Redundant power supplies, redundant controllers. Basically, we need an enterprise-grade reliability. Assuming it's an iSCSI device, you've got your LUN, you want to take a snapshot of it, you want to make sure it's consistent, so obviously, you're going to want Microsoft BSS support, be able to coordinate that with the operating system. You want to obviously support for volume greater than 2 terabytes, believe it or not, that's still a restriction on some products. You want a fast tier 1 for all your hot data. You want to serve off SSD or something that's much faster than spinning disk. That way, all the hot data is going to be, the users aren't going to notice performance hits, and it's going to be, hot data is readily accessible. We want a disaster recovery in a reasonable time frame, and this can be a challenge for traditional cloud backups. In that, let's say you have a device that looks like a SIFS target, let's say, but on the back end it just sends the data to the cloud. Okay, so you run your backup software, you dump it on this device and sends it to the cloud. That's all great, but let's say you do have a disaster. How long is it going to take you, even on a high bandwidth link, how long is it going to take you to suck all that data back down and restore it so that you can fire up your systems? Probably going to be a while, even if you've got a high-speed link. In making the decision, like I said, quite a few devices out there are NAS devices, virtual appliances. There are several that do have their own hardware. A lot of vendors, like I said, wanted to sell you the device and the cloud storage, so why not just go direct? When we were doing this analysis at the time, and this may still be true, of all the vendors offering an iSCSI interface, most of them did not offer true deduplication on the back end of that. The availability of dual controllers, that was pretty rare. It was pretty hard to find. What we ended up choosing was the StorSimple solution. They met most of the criteria that I had laid out there, basically. I'll go through the details here, but I mean, the bottom line is that it does what they say that it does, and it does it well. And there's not many vendors out there that you can say that. I mean, I know that. Let's see. I think it was back in. I don't know if it was back in 03. I was looking at, doing kind of a similar analysis, considering going to VMware ESX. And, at the time, back in 03, we were pretty early adopters, and I was kind of skeptical, like, okay, is this really going to work? Is it really, is it possible to do what they claim it does? But we all know where that went. I mean, so, anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I think this is a similar sort of game-changing technology. I mean, I think ultimately this is where things are going. From a storage perspective. You've got, obviously an iSCSI LUN that integrates itself into your existing systems. You can mount it up on VMware, you can mount it up on Windows. We do both, depending on what type of data we're storing. It's really simple to manage. I mean, if you can set up an iSCSI SAN, which is easy in and of itself, you can set this thing up. I mean, I was able to do it in, like 15 minutes. It's really simple. You've got thin provisioning. You got tiering between the SSD, the spinning disk, and then finally to the cloud. You can send your data to multiple different cloud providers if you want. It integrates with VSS, so you can take consistent copies of your Microsoft apps. As far as the security goes, I mean, obviously, like I said, that can be a big concern for management, especially, or your auditors, getting it past them. Everyone's going to say, oh, it's the public cloud, and they just have this impression that your data is just sitting out there on a bulletin board somewhere. I mean, it's good enough for the military. It's certified by the government for, information categorized as, quote, top secret. So if it's good enough for that, I think it's probably good enough for most enterprises to store the data in the public cloud. Dual controllers, non-disruptive software upgrades. When they do come out with a new version, you can update one controller while it's running off with the second one, and then fail it over, upgrade the other controller. No downtime required. So that was pretty nice. Okay, so one more thing, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, in a disaster recovery scenario, say you've got tape backup here, or standard cloud backup where you just use your cloud device as a backup target. One thing you can do with this device that we settle on, the StorSimple device, is say you have your LUNs, you've taken snapshots, okay? The hot data is cached locally. Now you have a disaster. Your whole data center blows up. Okay, so what do? If you go somewhere else, get a fresh out-of-the-box device, plug it in, set it up. You can mount your LUNs pretty much instantly. You mount them up, and then as the blocks are accessed, they're pulled down from the cloud. So you can basically fire up your systems right from the start as soon as you mount those LUNs. You start pulling data back only as needed. But in the meantime, your systems are running. With tape and other cloud backup solutions, you need to pull all your data down, restore it onto a server, and that's obviously going to take a decent more time than just firing up a LUN, mounting it, and letting it come down as needed. So that's another advantage as well. So, you know, we ended up with a solution that gives us unlimited elastic expansion, high availability, access from anywhere, and really ends up saving you quite a bit of money in the end. Okay. Well, thanks a lot.